The Carolina Panthers just made a move that is head-scratching to say the least. While we did bring in a veteran cornerback that was desperately needed, we also chose to release a young, promising player that was penciled in to be the starter for the 2023 season. So in this video, we're going to discuss exactly what went down. I'm going to give you my reactions, and we're going to get into all of that stuff right after this.
I'm from the foe, you dig?
Welcome to The Way I See It with Jamario Rashad. This is a Carolina Panthers fan channel. Please do me a favor by hitting the like button, and please make sure you subscribe, as I am on my road to 3K, trying to make sure my channel continues to grow before these games get started very, very soon. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and get to what went down. So if you have not heard, the Carolina Panthers have agreed in principle to sign veteran 7th-year cornerback Troy Hill Jr., formerly of the Los Angeles Rams, to a deal in principle. But beforehand, they did have to make a coinciding move to open up a roster spot. So unfortunately, that meant that somebody had to be released. Now, who was the unfortunate victim of that circumstance? That being 2nd-year undrafted defensive tackle, penciled in as the starting nose tackle, Marquan McCall. It came to a shock to myself and the majority of people who got this news throughout social media when we heard this news, as we believe that Marquan McCall was very far down the list of guys that should have been replaced. But before I give you my my overall reactions, we're going to listen to what head coach Frank Reich had to say about this acquisition and what he what are his justifications for letting go of Marquan McCall. So before I get to that, let's go ahead and just take a listen to what coach had to say.
We'll get started. Just open up with an update on a transaction that we're making right now. Unfortunately, we've had to release Marquan McCall. Those are tough decisions. We appreciate his contribution. Honestly, we're doing it now because we think he's going to be on a roster somewhere. It just comes down to two things. It comes down to a fit, for us and what we're trying to do. And then we've had a couple guys at that position who have, really look good. So I wish Marquan the best and appreciate his contribution. I'll open it up from there.
Frank, he's a guy that started your preseason opener. Why the sudden turn of events here?
I think it does come down to the two things that we're talking about. It really comes down to fit with a certain scheme and style that we're looking for. And then some of the young guys that we've brought in have really risen to the challenge. And so it's been very competitive, right? This time of the year, as you guys know, like this next week is, for us coaches, this is as tough as it gets because, you feel like legitimately, I feel like every guy on our 90-man roster, I feel like every one of these players is good enough to make a 53-man roster. And so, when you get to this side, when you get to this point, it's pretty tough.
Frank, you guys have talked about running the 3-4. He's a pretty traditional nose tackle. When you say fit, do you just how do you quantify it?
It's in multiple ways. I don't want to really. It's a very fair question because you're right. Just body type and other ways you think. Well, he is the traditional 3-4, and that's why I think he's going to be on a roster. I think for us in our scheme, there's more nuances to it than the traditional thing. So I just leave it at that. But good, fair, and good question.
Did it come to watching how he fit in the games? And you brought up consistency with a lot of players who are fighting for jobs. Is that kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah, every position is competitive. And, like I said, the young guys that we have at that position have performed well. And so.
All right, so there you have it. That is what head coach Frank Reich had to say about why the Carolina Panthers elected to release starting nose tackle Marquan McCall. So I have a few thoughts initially. First being that I don't completely buy the justification, the explanation, the reasoning, whatever people would like to call what we just heard from Frank Reich. It did sound like a bit of babbling to me because I didn't hear a fair and or relevant reason why you would give away or elect to to waive a player that you had held highly in such regard so early in the process, as there is still another game left. I understand what he wants to say. Oh, he is good enough to make a yada yada yada. All of that. I believe there has to be something else that may be off the field. I hope everything's good with Marquan, like off the field in his personal life. But if it comes down to what we see between the lines and on the field, there is no reason that Marquan was the person that had to lose his job for Troy Hill to come in, and also for Frank Reich to be making the declaration that part of the reason that this is happening is so that he has the opportunity to go somewhere else, because he is talented enough and he is confident enough to know that he is talented enough, that Marquan has the talent to make a 53-man roster in the NFL. I just want to know, at what point did this team become good enough to be giving away talent that's good enough to be a relevant piece on another team? When did we become so stacked on the defensive side of the ball? When were we just so littered with defensive tackles that we just did not have enough room to play snaps for everybody, that we just needed to give a decent, if not plus level talent away? When did we get that good? I don't recall seeing this team be that damn good. Maybe y'all did, but I haven't. This goes back to like even a few weeks ago when they were still in camp. You have all of these interviews coming out. Now, Frank Reich being the head coach, it is very known that even though he is the head coach, he is the play caller. The majority of his expertise and the focus for Frank Reich is on the offensive side of the ball. When we were doing these initial interviews and a lot of the interviews throughout camp, they interviewed all of the actual defensive coaches. Now, when we actually got to hear the interview from defensive line coach Todd Wash, he was the one that actually said that Marquan had been showing the skill level, the flashes, and he was the one that declared that Marquan at that time had been penciled in as the starter. That is how we, the public, got that information. This guy coming over from Detroit and bringing a defensive tackle in John Penasini with him, who he knew what he was bringing, and he still said a undrafted guy that I am just now laying my eyes on is good enough for me to say that he should be out there starting in this system. And with Todd Wash being the one that actually works closely and hand in hand with these guys, that just leads me to believe that, again, I just believe that there has to be a little bit more behind the scenes as to why Marquan McCall would be the one that had to be the victim of this circumstance, especially when you got the likes of Ejiro Gross models that has just been absolutely terrible out there. You have Michael Jordan, who is still on this team as a freaking big ass turnstile that does nothing but take up space. You have various other players that are out there not showing very much promise at all. You have plenty of practice squad players that we know for a fact are not going to make the roster this year, didn't make it last year, and they're just going to be another practice squad player. Why in the hell would somebody that is marked and that is penciled in to be a starter be the one that you feel as though you have to release to sign a veteran that we don't even necessarily know is going to hit immediately? That is a question that I need to be answered, and I don't feel like Frank Reich adequately answered that question, and I believe that this is a bad move. I'm not going to take the wait and see philosophy with this, or the outlook on this. No, this was a bad move, bad timing. If there is not something else that we do not just know about as fans that went down behind the scenes, this is just bad management, a bad move, and just very Matt Rule-ish, if you ask me, man. But those are my opinions on Marquan McCall and him unfortunately being waived by this team. I just really hope that he does not go to the Bears, but I'm pretty sure that the Bears are probably going to sign him, as they have signed all of the Carolina Panther castaways this offseason. So now, let's go ahead and discuss who we have in Troy Hill, our newest acquisition, coming to our locker room to be a veteran cornerback. Troy Hill is a 7th-year player, undrafted, from Oregon. He spent majority of his years with the Los Angeles Rams, but spending one season with the Cleveland Browns. Now, in my opinion, Troy Hill does not come in and pose any threat to be an immediate starter and or, you know, one of like the or any threat to have one of those top 3 positions. If you look top 3 positions on our depth chart, if you look at what Troy Hill has been able to do recently in terms of his pass coverage in 2022, he allowed for a passer rating of 103.3, a completion percentage of 71.4, and 421 yards allowed, as well as 3 touchdowns. This was in 12 games, but if I was to give you a side-by-side of this and somebody that is very maligned on this Carolina Panthers team right now in the DB room, it would look very, very similar. Essentially, I'm saying that he and CJ Henderson are not that different or not that far apart. This guy does come in with a lot more experience. He has played alongside the likes of a Jalen Ramsey, that back in 2020 when he had his best year ever. Since then, he has hit 30. He is now 31. He could potentially be 32 before the end of the season. So he is on the, he will actually be 32 years old in a few days before the season starts. So he is on the back half of his career. So what he brings to the locker room mostly, or what he brings to the team mostly, is knowledge, experience, and just veteran expertise that been there, done that these young guys scattered throughout this roster desperately need. So as of right now, I see Troy Hill being slotted in if he makes the team, which I truly expect him to. Why bring him in if he's not? He will either be that fourth cornerback slotted in over Keith Taylor Jr., but or depending on how he performs in this next preseason game and how they look in practice, he could potentially come in to be that cornerback 3. But he definitely does add depth in an otherwise constantly, frequently injured cornerback room that we have. So he shall bring us some type of relief there, man. But those are my thoughts on the acquisition of Troy Hill and the departure, the waiving, the releasing of starting nose tackle Marquan McCall. What do you all think about these moves? Do you all think that this was right? Do you think that the Marquan move was justified? Do you think I'm tripping? Do you think Frank Reich and Scott Fitterer and his folks tripping, man? Whatever you all think, leave your comments down below and I'll be sure to chop it up with you there. But until next time, man, I am Jamario Rashad. This is the way I see it, and I'm out. Peace.